Is Russia preparing another mobilization to get more soldiers for its war against Ukraine? The Kremlin says no, but that's not what our source told us.
The number of people who are forced to sign the contract, who are at least afraid of being forced to sign the contract, is rising every day and every week.
That was Ivan Chuvilyaev. He helps men in Russia avoid being drafted into the military. And he says there's a stealth mobilization going on. And that led him to get more requests for help than he has in 4 years. You'll hear more from him later. But first, I wanted to find out what's behind all these rumours that Russia is preparing a new mobilization. One person who clearly believes it's going to happen is Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. Here's what he said a few days ago.
I've got a report from our defence intelligence on Russia's preparations for mobilization. Everything is confirmed by internal Russian documents. They're preparing it for the fall, right after they have this imitation of parliamentary elections.
Russia's denial came just now from New York. Russia's UN ambassador said, quote, "Don't worry about mobilization in Russia. I think this has already been said many times. We don't need mass mobilization right now. It's not planned or expected, as far as I know." Clearly, not everyone is buying that denial. In recent days, unusually heavy traffic has been reported at the border crossing between Russia and neighbouring Georgia. That same crossing where thousands of Russian men tried to leave the country back in 2022 during Russia's last partial mobilisation. So to get a better read on the situation, I called Brian Whitmore. He's been analysing the Kremlin for over 2 decades as Moscow correspondent, a senior Russia analyst, and is now a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. I started by asking him what he thought the chances were of another round of mobilisation.
I mean, I put it around 50-50, to be honest. I think maybe even a little bit less than that. I mean, the cost of a full mobilization in terms of the potential social explosion it could cause and the disruptions in the civilian labor force, which would be significant in Russia at this point. I think it's 50-50. There's no doubt in my mind that Russia has a manpower problem, and I can expound on that as we go along. But I still put the possibility of a full mobilization at 50-50 at best, and certainly not until after September.
Okay, interesting. So how do you read this sort of intensified pressure that we are seeing on men in Russia to join the force?
Well, I mean, Russia's got a manpower problem at the front. Russian forces are averaging between 30,000 and 34,000 casualties a month. Right? That's either killed in action or wounded to the extent that they cannot return to the battlefield. And at the same time, they're recruiting roughly 27,000 new recruits a month. So that's not sustainable, right? This year alone, Russia suffered an estimated 225,000 casualties, more than 225,000 casualties, and they've only recruited 221,000 contract soldiers. So this deficit over time is just not sustainable.
Those numbers Brian just mentioned come from the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, a respected Washington think tank that puts together independent figures from the war in Ukraine. They say Russia is losing about 30,000 soldiers a month, and even with their current recruiting, still face a deficit of around 3,000 soldiers every month. So while Russia is probably not facing an acute recruitment crisis just yet, maintaining the quality, training level and long-term demographics of the Russian military is proving a difficult challenge and harder than simply finding additional troops. The current system generally attracts socially disadvantaged people, including the unemployed and prisoners. They're typically people with low motivation and limited qualifications. And increasingly, warfare needs trained specialists rather than just mass infantry. So how is Russia making up the gap?
Well, I mean, there's financial incentives. There are large cash incentives for people to sign up. So there's the carrot, but that's going to run into problems over time too, because the Russian economy is running into problems right now. The Russia's on the verge of a potential banking crisis, and they also use coercion. They're recruiting from the prisons, of course. And people are kind of just being press ganged into service, but it's not enough. I mean, they've basically reached the limit of what they can recruit along these lines. If the casualty rate continues at the rate that it's been going, certainly for this year. It's just not going to be sustainable for Russia in the long term. And I'm expecting if anything happens, it's going to be after the State Duma elections in September. Now, Russian elections are not elections. We all know that. Russian elections are political theater. But Putin and the Kremlin do not want bad optics in their political theater, and that's something that a mobilization could cause. So anything that happens is most likely to happen after the election.
So what are their options then? If they've got this gap to fill, what can they do? Are they likely to lean into maybe other countries, soldiers from other countries to fill the gap?
Well, yeah, they are using soldiers from North Korea. That's been going on, and I expect that to continue going forward. So that's one possibility. There's talk of what's called mobilization without the name, right? The strategy is of the stealth mobilization, rather than declaring it another draft, a second wave of mobilization. They aim to use intensive legal coercion, pressuring conscripts, deploying thousands of North Korean troops to stave off an official announcement as long as possible. But again, these are band-aids. I mean, I think this is a problem that really doesn't have a solution right now that is politically palatable. Sure, they could mobilize. They can certainly do that. They can have a draft, but at what cost? How much risk are they willing to incur for this? Right? The very delicate political and social balance. Russia's a dictatorship, but the Kremlin is very, very, very sensitive to the mood of the public. And the last thing they want right now is a social explosion, which a mobilization could cause.
Let's go back to Ivan Chuvilyaev, who we heard from briefly at the top. He works for an organisation that helps Russian men who don't want to be drafted into the military. It's called Get Lost, and Ivan says it doesn't really matter whether the Russian government officially talks about mobilisation or not. Either way, more and more Russian men are being pressured into the army.
And the number of people who are forced to sign the contract, who are at least afraid of being forced to sign the contract, is rising every day and every week. For instance, for the last 10 days, we got 10 times more applies to our chatbot, 10 times more applications concerned with forcing people to sign contract, using police, using power, tortures, and so on and so on and so on. So we see that the number of people who are forced to sign the contract rises dramatically for the last couple of months, after quite quiet period of the first months of this year, from January to April, I would say, when Russian military commanders faced some difficulties with new contractors, with new drafts. And now they are extremely active. As I have already said, it is the most active period for all these 4 years.
Wow, okay, so that's really interesting. A couple of things there. Talk to me a bit about the timing, like why is this happening now as opposed to, as you said, earlier in the year? And also these men that are reaching out to you, what are their motives? Why do they not want to go to the war in Ukraine?
Well, speaking about their emotions and why doesn't they want to go to Ukraine, it never changes. They doesn't want to go to the war because they doesn't want to die, and they doesn't want to be criminals. They doesn't want to kill anybody. to kill other humans. It's simple as it is. And nothing changes that way for the last 4 years. Everybody wanted just to be a free, peaceful man. And everybody has a chance to be a free, peaceful man, not to collaborate with Putin, not to collaborate with war criminals. From the other hand, speaking about what changes for the last year, well, even independent media and foreign media, for instance, New York Times and Wall Street Journal, wrote numerous articles this winter about difficulties of Russian military commandos with new contractors. That the number of deaths on the front line is much bigger than the number of new contractors for the first time during all the war. From another hand, as we see, this spring, the level of pressure to local authorities, to mayors, local parliaments, and other levels of local authorities was extremely big, because Putin wanted them to bring him more soldiers, more contractors, and they had simply no instruments to get any new people. And the only instrument they got was the police.
Ivan told me it's become increasingly difficult for young men to leave Russia to avoid being drafted. And with that in mind, I was curious to know what he made of those queues of cars that we saw on the border with Georgia.
For now, these pictures are just an illustration of panic. Because, of course, it is a panic. The state of Russian society nowadays, today, is a panic. It is not the first, not the second, and not the third wave of panic in Russian society during this war. It is quite a common state, but it is a panic because they are still living in a country in war. They are still living in a country where they doesn't know what rights do they have. What could they do not to participate in this war? And every day, their opportunity not to participate in this war is getting tiny, more and more tiny. But we still are ready to provide them any help and to help them not to participate in this war if they are not participating in it yet, or to leave the front line if they are already forced to sign the contract.
So what specifically is your organisation doing to help these men? That's really interesting to me.
Speaking about deserters, we are helping them to leave the front line and to leave the country, or if they are not ready to do it, not ready to go to Armenia or to any other country they could go. We are helping them to hide inside Russia as long as they could and not to be catched by police. We provide them all the consultations, we provide them all the information concerned with their security and their safety. Speaking about people who are not still on the front line, who could be forced to sign the contract, we still provide them any kind of legal consultations. What should they do? It depends on their status, as I have already said. If these are students, we provide them consultations. What should they do not to be forced to sign the contract? If they are, if they could be drafted to regular military service, we provide them consultations concerned with that. So we are still working with them. We are still helping them. We are still consulting them. We are still giving them all the newest information possible, up to date.
And just to get a grasp on the numbers here, you mentioned that you've had sort of 10 times the amount of interest in the past wee while. How many people would you help every month? And so how many more people are you helping now with this renewed interest?
Speaking about people we are helping every month, for now, I think that in August we would speak about more than 1,000 people, just because it is a panic and we still see that the number of applications is rising every day and every hour. Speaking about this year, we still doesn't have certain numbers, of course, but we see that these numbers are higher and higher every month.
That was honestly a pretty bleak outlook from Ivan. We also asked Brian what you and I should be looking out for to see where this situation is headed.
Well, in terms of the mobilization, I don't expect to see much in the next couple of weeks. I would wait. I would wait till late next month, late September, early October, if we see any signs of a mobilization. I'd be looking for kind of signs in statements by Russian officials that appear to be preparing the public for this. So far, we're not really seeing this. I mean, there's kind of
What would that language look
division.
like, out of interest?
Pardon me?
What would that language look like?
I mean, it would be kind of, playing up the need for sacrifices to be made in the national interest, and that's how they would frame it, I would imagine. But I'll be looking at that going forward. But I don't expect to see much action on this until late September at the earliest, and probably into October. And like I said at the outset, I think there's a less than 50% chance we're going to have a full mobilization. I think we're going to have more of a mobilization without the name. More of a stealth mobilization, increased coercion on people to enlist. Meanwhile, Russians are leaving the country to escape this. So I do not think this situation looks sustainable for Russia at the moment.
So according to both our guests, it's going to be a number of weeks until we could see anything close to a formal mobilisation. But regardless, the stealth mobilisation and pressure campaign looks set to continue. Thanks for joining us.